What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Tide Talk. Just a reminder, each episode is available on YouTube, and if you're watching now, please take a second to subscribe to our channel and click the like button on this video. You can also find us on your favorite podcast applications like Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and if you listen on one of those, we'd really appreciate it if you took a minute to leave us a 5-star rating and a short review, as it helps more people find our podcast. One last plug, if you're not already, go check out the RIFC Club Collector app and enter the code TIDETALK25, all lowercase, all one word, to get an exclusive pack added to your collection today. So cozy up, crack a bear. Let's dive into this one. I'm your host, Matt, and I'm joined by my good friends, Andrew and Timmy, and I've also got Zach from the Junior Defiance joining us today. Zach, we'll start with you. How was your day? How was your soccer game?
Good.
How many goals did you score?
3.
How many assists?
1.
Pretty good performance there from Zach. He had a really good day, fought hard all for the whole game. Andrew, how's it going, man?
Doing well. Excited to be back. Although my first appearance back for this season has been trumped by having your son / goal scorers extraordinaire on. So, but glad to see you and Zach and all you guys.
So Timmy cut out on watching White Lotus with the missus to join us tonight. So it's a very special, rare occasion we have Mr. Timmy Sclafani with us. Timmy, what's going on, man?
Yeah, not much. Thank you for having me on. Always love to do it. I was just thinking this is the third time that I've seen you guys in a week. That's more than regular season numbers.
That's pretty good stuff, right? I think we'll kind of start with how we first saw each other this week in the Tidewater Landing tour. I know my impressions of it were just what an absolute beautiful stadium is being built there on the river. Not done yet. There's still a little bit of work to do, but what is there is absolutely top notch. And we'll start with you on this one, Timmy. Get your thoughts on it. You, Andrew, and Kevin and Ryan all went on the tour of the stadium. Just like I said, absolutely beautiful, really cool experience. Talk about your thoughts from that walkthrough.
Yeah, I mean, the stadium is incredible. Like, I know myself and lots of other folks drive by it pretty regularly, but to see it up close and actually be walking around inside of it, it feels a lot more real. And the tour kind of takes you through like some of the inside, some of the suite areas, but then my favorite part, and it was my favorite part the first time that I did a tour, which was also with Andrew, it's like when they take you down onto the field and you get to kind of look up. You walk through the players' tunnel, stand kind of around the corner flag. So I just think the entire experience is great. They do a really nice job running the tours. We had, I think, 3 kind of ticket reps who were running our tour, and it's good that they had 3 of them because the volume of questions coming out of our group in particular, I think they needed all 3 of them to answer them. And what's even funnier is there were a few questions that other people on the tour would ask that none of them knew the answer to. And Kevin, aka Fluffy Cohog Boy, pretty reliably had the answers every time. So he was taking some of the questions as well. But yeah, the stadium progress, I think, is coming along really nicely. They kind of said it themselves, but it's pretty much done. There's just a ton of like materials and like loose things still around. So I think all of that obviously needs to be cleaned up. There's still some areas of the concourse that need to be like paved, but they're not going to do that until most of the vehicle traffic is done. And then obviously the riverside seating still needs to go in. But other than that, yeah, it's looking pretty good. Andrew,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I'll also add, Timmy, before we kick it to Andrew. We've had a lot of questions in the RIFC Nation Facebook group, which is closing in on 1,000 members. So if you're not already in that Facebook group, go join that today. Kind of about the Riverside seating and what that'll, how far along that is. When we were there, they were pretty much just putting the footings in for the stands, and those are actually going to be movable stands, which was one tidbit that I learned that we learned on the tour that I was pretty excited about. So when concerts come to Tidewater, the stage will essentially be where the Jumbotron is, and those seats will get kicked out, and seating on the field will go the length of the pitch rather than, kind of like if you think about Gillette and how it goes, and it goes the the long way rather than the wide way. So I'm pretty excited about where my seats are in 117, having a pretty good angle at the concerts. But that was something pretty cool to learn, that what the concert setup would look like. They did say that that's going to be one of the last things to go in. Are those Riverside seats? So I think hopefully they'll be ready. Hopefully they'll be good to go in time. If not, that would be a really stinky standing section for the first game. But like Timmy said, Andrew, your thoughts overall on that tour and how fun that was?
Yeah, definitely. And really quickly on those movable seats, it sounds like it's a pretty quick process to put it back in there. So I think having that ability to move them in and out also allows for certain events for them to be able to bring in, larger materials as well,
Sure.
whether it's concerts or, any other sort of events going on in the field. So pretty neat the way that they have it set up. And obviously that's on the Riverside too. So there's just more space to get around. Overall, the stadium was great. I mean, it was, as Timmy mentioned, he and I went there back in, I want to say it was like late August or something. And it was right before they really started putting the seats down. Like they just had the metal handrails installed at that point. So taking it from that point where we saw it then, where we just saw a lot of concrete and we were kind of envisioning what things were going to look like. And you got a good sense of like spacing and how big it is and how close you might be to the field. But there were no seats yet. The turf wasn't installed. So being able to kind of actually see all of that, actually take us down to the turf, walk around on the turf.
How cool is it going on the pitch?
It was great. I think you did what I did, which was like started touching the turf. It's like, I want to see what this feels like. But it was really cool. And the entrance that we went into was the entrance that the team would be walking in from. So it was all very, very cool. And then a lot of us have, particularly the Tide Talk side, sections in the middle part of the upper level, the 200 levels. And we got to go there and actually see, we were one section over, but we actually got to see in the front row what our seats were going to look like. And you realize that even in that second level, how close you are to the field with it being right in front of you. So it was all a very cool experience. The one downside was, I think typically we would have gotten to see the locker rooms. Unbeknownst to us, literally that day, we found out earlier that afternoon that was the first training that the team did in the new stadium, in their new home. So glad for them, but because it was being used, we weren't allowed to go in and check out the locker room. So kind of stinks. If we had just done it one slot earlier or one day earlier, we'd have got to see an almost finished locker room. And then I think the next day the team put out a video of what that locker room looks like, and it looks incredible. So it really,
they didn't want us to ruin that video for them.
Yeah, exactly. But the whole stadium, you could just tell a lot of thought went into it. And just the way it was designed, the close-knit feel of it all, how nice everything is, it just got us really excited for the upcoming season.
I like what you said about the the well-designed and kind of intention of things, because they told us on the tour that the amount of steps it'll take to get to the opposing team's locker room at halftime is something like 250, give or take, and the amount of steps it'll take for RFC to get to their locker room is 57. So just like those extra tidbits of where Connor wants his team.
The path they're walking is directly under where Defiance is going to be sitting too, which is a cool detail.
Right. And those locker rooms are also directly under. So if we're allowed at halftime, they'll be able to hear it as well. But like just those little details that you got to tip the hat to Kano too on, making the other team work a little bit harder, expend a little bit more energy here and there, and just really give a home field advantage to Tidewater Landing.
Yeah, they mentioned too. I think they said Kano chose to take the far bench to be our home bench so that the away team would be closer to the supporters group. Which is
exactly. Yep.
Yeah, another really cool detail. One question that some people here listening might have, that I think, Matt, it was you that asked, was what is that post-game experience going to be like, given that with Bryant we had a lot of access to players being able to go down the field? And it sounds like the answer was pretty much, we want to be able to do that again, but obviously being in a new stadium, bigger environment, there's going to be more security concerns. So they're trying to figure out what's the best way that they can replicate that type of environment. It sounds like it could just be that there's specific games where they allow that as opposed to just every game, but just something to look out for in terms of how the team's going to be managing over the course of the season.
Mm-hmm. Ryan did say in the chat that we had a dedicated person on our tour for Kevin's parking questions, and that did ring true. So those of you who follow the Fluffy Clam on Twitter know that Kevin likes to raise a little stick on the parking issue, and that was also true. And if you follow me on Twitter, I'm very upset about the lack of a kit. And the team store looks absolutely beautiful inside the stadium. It is a glass box of emotion, to quote one of my favorite movies, but it's super tiny. And I think Andrew, you said it best in our group chat. Yeah, it's tiny to have the 3 keychains that the club will have in stock, or whatever it was. So we're hoping for a better inventory of items, and hopefully the social media pushed by fans in complaining about the lack of a new home or away kit will lead to maybe a third kit popping up mid-season. But we're going to continue that push, and every time a new team tweets out their new jersey, even Hartford, like we're going to retweet it and complain about it, so Capelli and RIFC know that we are not happy, because even if like the Portland Hearts of Pine shirt, the long sleeve one is like $120. So you think about how quickly those 2 jerseys sold out last year. You couldn't get the amber one till like 3 games in, I believe, maybe even more. So like we would want that. We would buy it. We would consume it. So just thinks that the club and Capelli didn't respond with that. But I'm sure that'll be a another question for later, and hopefully we can tease it out and get a third one dropped. We've got Ron in the chat. Will there be an area to tailgate pregame? We're hearing very much that Apex will be the tailgate spot. That's where the Defiance will have their designated area. Timmy, Andrew, myself are all rocking the Defiance koozies tonight, I can see. Don't worry, Ryan. I know you're on a flight home from Mexico or layover somewhere, but I'll have yours, and I'll get you them before the first home tailgate. But the Apex lot will be the main tailgate lot. Andrew, Kevin, and myself went to Cantinos, which is probably about I would say 5 to 10 minute walk away from the stadium pregame, and it was a really cool Cape Verdean spot. Awesome rooftop bar. Really nice views. You can see the stadium from up there, and I know Kevin's doing some work, and there might be some Tide Talk content coming from there pregame. So there are a lot of kind of weird nooks and crannies and for parking in that area, and I think if you get there early enough, you'll be able to find free parking and kind of link up with a local business like that as well. But Andrew, I'll kind of let you talk about Cantinos a bit as we down some Superbox.
Yeah, it was a cool spot. We were able to grab a couple before the tour and kind of check the place out. Obviously, the parking has been a big question in people's mind, but along with the parking, what does that mean in terms of tailgating? So while I do think there's going to be some tailgating spots, there's still a question for me of where we're going to be able to meet as a group, if we're going to be able to meet as a group. And honestly, the situation might be very much in line with a lot of other stadiums and cities where there is no one spot because you're in a city and there's not just one big lot like there was at Bryant. So having options, I think, is going to be helpful. And I think the idea is that you're trying to draw on different businesses around the stadium as well and have them benefit. It continues, I think, is in a great spot. Like I said, 5-minute walk from the stadium, rooftop bar, really nice inside. Seem like they have a great menu as well. So definitely an option there. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other options between Heimwater and others where you might be able to meet up with whatever group you want to hang out with and grab a drink or two before the game, before you head in. And then the other thing I'll say too is, and they mentioned on the tour, the team does have food and drink space outside of the gates of the stadium, because I think what they want to be able to do is set up a pretty open space where you can do your, not tailgating, but your pregame drinking and eating at the stadium itself. And I know that was a big concern last year with Bryant, especially from a food perspective. People wanted to go early and then grab a bite, but they couldn't do that unless they went through the gate. So it sounds like
that's a good point.
For food, you'll be able to do that at the stadium. And I think that's going to end up being a bit of an area where people are going to hang out as well, just given the fact that it's there and it seems like it's a pretty decent sized space. But yeah, Cantinos was great, and I think there's going to be a lot of good options that businesses in that area are really going to set themselves up for the season.
Pretty well said. Also worth noting that in the tour, they did mention that California Taco would be back in some way, shape, or form. So whether the truck is in that area or somewhere set up inside, I know that was a fan favorite, and it was always one of the fastest and easiest food options, being so close to the supporter section last year. But really good food, pretty good people, and they get it out pretty quickly, which is also a major plus. But let's kind of dive into the meat and potatoes of this one and some of the questions. But we talked about the tour, and it's also worth noting, we mentioned the Defiance party the other night where we picked up the scarves, the koozies, and all that. They got some awesome things planned for this year. Zach, you got to see the Junior Defiance banner How cool is that?
Cool.
It was pretty cool. You excited? And I know one big plan is to have all the Junior Defiance members sign it as well. So you gonna sign it?
Mhm.
Pretty excited for that. Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. But kind of jumping into a little bit more of the preview part. Let's start with the first week of action. I know a lot of us watched a lot of USL last night. We watched Hartford take a 2-0 loss and a red card in their first game. Was that so much about Hartford being really bad, or Lexington, looking really good in their first USL Championship game, Timmy?
It was Hartford being really bad. It was
Okay.
100%. It was Hartford being really bad. I thought Lexington had some moments and some players. I'm not saying that Lexington was bad. I think they looked like a team like a capable team.
I think they looked pretty decent.
Yeah. I think they can.
And one thing I'll add, before you give your full take, is we were watching the Tormenta Kickers game at the Defiance party, and I thought both of those teams looked pretty good. I thought the Kickers looked really good, but as far as a USL 1 team coming up to the championship, I thought Lexington looked pretty sharp.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, since you mentioned the League One game as well, like almost every game that I watched this weekend reminded me of all the things that I like about this league, or leagues, I guess. It's just kind of, the quality of play is not like quite maybe what you're used to with Premier League or even MLS, but there's like a lot of parity among all of the teams. A lot of times high scoring, like a lot of the games last night had, I think that one finished like 4-2. There was 4 red cards across 11 games last night. So yeah, just like a really fun league to watch, in my opinion. I don't have too much more to say about Lexington and Hartford, except there was a player on Lexington, Kieran Sargent. He was playing left back. I think he's 21 years old. I don't know if anyone else saw him, but he was kind of like jumping off the screen every time I was watching. So I liked that. I thought that was Lexington's stadium opener, if I'm not mistaken. They announced 5,000 people were there. It didn't quite look like 5,000 to me. I know we know that that's like tickets sold and not like actual tickets swiped. But my kind of rule of thumb that I was devising last night, again, kind of across all of the games, is like, I don't really want to be able to either read the letters or see the colors of the seats. If I can like really make out the pattern or the letters, there's not enough people there. But yeah, I don't know what you guys might have to add on that game. You both know I kept falling asleep. I was falling asleep all night last night watching the game, so that's kind of what I got.
I think to your point of not seeing the seats or the letters on the seats, thank God we got some big backs up there in 205 blocking at least one of the letters. But Matt Hans wants to know, did Sargent get a 7 out of 10? And Jason did add in the chat too, that first Lexington goal was an absolute bomb. That was a really, really nice goal, so we'll give him credit for that. But Andrew, I know you watched a bit of the championship last night. Any highlights from you from any of the other matches or that Hartford Lexington one?
Yeah, it was a fun night. I mean, the Hartford Lexington one started at 7, so I was still kind of in the middle of putting the kids down and all that, so I was kind of watching on and off. But then I was able to lock in once the kids were down, and then had the ESPN multi-screen going. So I basically was watching a lot of games at once, which is cool in that you can kind of pick your spots and see it. But at the same time,
that one was on Golazzo though, right?
Yeah, so I had the one in Golazzo on my laptop, which I think was the Lou City Charleston game, and then I had the other games up on the ESPN multi-screen. So it makes it a little bit tough to really zero in on anything that's going on. But whenever I did look over to that Lexington game, Lexington looked like they belonged there, and it's just hard to know if it was just Hartford being bad, which they were, or if it was Lexington just being good. But that goal was like 5 minutes into the game, and it was an absolute rocket. And I think that will probably be the goal of the week. There was one other one, another match that will contend with it, but top-notch goal and really high-quality stuff that we saw there. So fun to see Hartford losing already in this season. Going down 2-0, getting a red card. They were really frustrated at the end of the match too. Like, you could just tell their frustration was boiling over. They were committing stupid fouls. Like their head wasn't in it at all. So it was a good start. And then for the other matches, obviously the big one was the Lou City and Charleston match. So two of the favorites, along with Rhode Island, to come out of the East. Throughout the whole broadcast, they pretty much kept saying that those are the top two favorites, and obviously we want Rhode Island to say something about that. But the tough part with this early in the season is you don't really know what to make of teams. Like, I think they're still trying to get into match shape. They're still trying to figure each other out because there's a decent amount of roster turnover in a lot of these rosters. And then, as I mentioned last night in our chat, like, we didn't know what this Rhode Island team was until over halfway through the year. It was like close to 2/3 of the team of the way through the year. Granted, that's a bit of an exception because it was a brand new team and everybody was coming together. But
Sure.
I think we saw, particularly during the previews throughout the course of the season last year, is that there was a very defined pattern that we were noticing of teams that started off on a run, good or bad. That was a pretty significant, like, a bunch of games undefeated and then a bunch of games that they couldn't win. And it didn't really seem to correlate with how good they were later on in the season. So I think it's interesting to see Lou City and Charleston already playing each other in week one, given that it's a heavyweight fight. But those two teams, I think, are going to be way different down the road. So Lou City did take it. It was a bit of a howler in terms of that game-winning goal that was given up by the Charleston keeper. So those fans, the last two games that they witnessed their team play was
Lee saves that
final against Rhode Island, losing against one of the favorites to win the league this year in Lou City, and hopefully they can see 3 losses in a row after next week once Rhode Island takes care of them. But the rest of the games were fun. I mean, there was a lot of good goals, a lot of red cards, a lot of sloppy play, as you might expect for the first week of the season. But it was fun to have it back, and I think having those 3-4 months off, I think really showed us how much we appreciated it, because I think everybody was, at least in the Tie Talk group, just locked into watching every single game because we were just excited to get soccer back. And it does suck that for the second year in a row, the whole league gets to have that week one party,
Right.
and we're just sitting there waiting. And the downside to that is that we might have a little bit of rustiness to knock off that Charleston might have already knocked off in this first week, particularly going to them in week 2. But it was just fun to be able to watch some USL again.
That's a great shout. Like Kevin says in the chat, it was a great opening night for USL. I'm guilty of not watching a ton of USL last season, but I was trying to flip around and watch as many of the games as possible. And I spent probably most of my time watching the Charleston Louisville game. And in my head and kind of looking at the teams and the rosters and who lost what and who brought in what, I would have said that I would have predicted Charleston to take the jump above Louisville and kind of solidify as maybe the top 1 or 2 teams in the East. Along with Rhode Island this year. But, I think I might have got it wrong. I think the Markanich gap for Charleston is really big. And I know it was a 2-1. It was a really good game, but Louisville looked pretty much like how Louisville looked, which is good for RIFC, as we are their official bogey team. But I think watching those two teams play and kind of knowing what we have on our roster, the East is very much there for the taking, and we would very much be right there with them, kind of going down the stretch. But let's turn gears a little bit and kind of look at some season predictions. And Zach, I'm going to start with you. Who do you think is RIFC's top goal scorer for this season coming up? Who do you think the top goal scorer is going to be this season?
What was that word?
The top goal scorer. Who's going to score the most goals?
Between 2 players.
Who are your 2 players?
JJ and Maxi.
Oh, JJ, that's a pretty good shout. So I could see, Maxi helping JJ helping Maxi, and, kind of go between the two. You see him tying, or do you see one of them scoring more?
I see him tying.
That would be a pretty good season if those two are leading the way as far as how goals go. Timmy, we'll kick it to you. Who do you have as your leading goal scorer?
I'm going to go with Mr. Albert Dikwa. I think he's got 15 goals in him this season. I know Andrew and I both cooked up this take like separately, and now we're overlapping. I'm probably stealing what you were going to say. But,
No.
I put it to ink first, even if it was only ink shared between each other. But
You did.
yeah, I think he's got 15 goals in him. I have a bunch of thoughts on this. One, I feel like he did have a bit of a down season last season, but the way that we all say that every time we talk about him, you would think he scored like 3 goals. He still led the team in goals and assists last season. He still had a really good season. And I think he's going to have a better season this season. it could go one of two ways. He could start a bunch of games and he could just kind of get off to a hotter start than last season. And I think the team has much more of an identity now than it did last season. So he'll be getting service from Noah, who obviously like completely figured out kind of how he wants to play.
The golden
second half of
playmaker.
last season. Golden playmaker, exactly.
Ryan wants you to be serious in this take, so I'm trying to give you some more arrows for the quiver.
I'm being serious. Or he's going to be coming off the bench if JJ and Noah are starting together, and it's probably going to be a little bit of each. Yes, Ryan, I know he might not be starting. That's part two, is coming off the bench, 70th minute, tired legs. You got Chico coming off the bench running at you. He's going to score a lot of goals that way. Like last season, we were bringing like Joe Brito off the bench as our first sub. If it's Albert Dikwa this season, I think he's going to score a ton of goals that way.
Timmy says Joe Brito coming off the bench like a bad thing. All the dude came in was doing. All he did was score goals.
I have Joe Brito as an answer to a question that we're coming up on where I'll pay my respects to him.
Ryan's having fun in the chat. He says, "Welcome to the Thunderdome of the chat, brother."
Yeah. No. All right. Well, what can we bet?
So this is what happens when we give the bloggers a face and a voice here on Tide Talk.
You're outnumbered here, buddy. You got 2 bloggers to 1 here.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. It's not a bad shout. And honestly, I wasn't going to pick Chico, but I was going to raise the point when we were experimenting with this bold predictions idea that I think Chico's going to have a lot better year than people will give him credit for or will expect. I think that there's a very good chance that he starts the year not starting. My pick to lead the team in goals is JJ, but I think that's highly dependent on his health and his ability to not only start games, but also to be himself, because we saw that he was pretty banged up at portions last year where he wasn't quite effective. And I can see Chico end up getting a lot more playing time, even if he's not starting at the beginning of the year, where he is starting those games or coming off the bench. And I think that going into this year, Chico not being the reigning Golden Boot and MVP will end up taking a lot of weight off his shoulders. And I also think that last year, not only did he have that weight on his shoulders, but the team offensively couldn't find its ass from its elbow for the majority of the year. Like they just didn't know what they were doing. You found it. They were trying to figure out really what that offensive identity was, and it took a long time for them to figure that out. And it really was the emergence of Noah in that secondary forward spot that really opened things up. And I think that if they get into a flow offensively, particularly with Maxi there now, I can very much see Chico end up having a very productive year from start to finish.
I thought Noah was a wingback last year.
He was a lot of different positions. I like the Maxi shout in that his numbers don't jump off the page from last year, but he also had a lot more defensive responsibilities in that setup that Detroit had. And the way that Rhode Island should be set up this year, I think he should be more free to really be a more creative type that's opening up the offense. And I can see him getting a lot more involved in terms of goals and assists than he might have last year. But my pick is JJ. And again, I think it just comes down to health from him. His size and his playing style just lends itself to injuries. He gets banged around a lot. And it's really a question of how well he's going to hold up over the course of the year. And that's the luxury of having 2 good forwards there. So I think Chico will have a good year. But JJ's my pick.
Ryan's got an interesting piece in the chat too that said Maxi might be our PK guy. You notice that Chico really struggled with penalties last year. We kind of couldn't really find that guy to hit from the spot. So maybe it's Maxi, and maybe he kind of pads the stats a little Mo Salah style from the penalty spot there. I do like Zach's point about Maxi potentially, being one of the leaders in goals, and I think he would benefit from JJ, and I think JJ will benefit a lot from Maxi and his service as well. Did I tell you to say Maxi, or did you come up with that on your own? Yeah, that was his own take, but I've got his own side of it, and I'm kind of with Andrew, and I'm with Kevin in the chat. It's JJ being healthy, really kind of being able to go at teams full strength from the beginning. I think he starts scoring early. He's got Noah putting the ball on a plate for him. He's got Quazero whipping in crosses. He's got Maxi whipping in balls. I think JJ is going to absolutely tear up the USL Championship this season. I got him 1 shy of 20. I got him with 19 goals on the season. I think that's enough to be our leading scorer, but I think we have a close second. We had that kind of big gap in goals last season, but I think we have Maxi right behind him with 17, or Noah right behind him with 15, and kind of in that 15 to 20 goal range. We see maybe 2 or 3 players that really kind of carry the load for this team. I don't think we see Frank getting a bunch of goals like he did. I'm sorry to say that, Matt Hands, the Cuban Missile Crisis might be diverted for a little bit. But I think that the trio of JJ, of Chico, Maxi, and Noah, I think that's 4, so not a trio. But like that attacking, prowess that we have is really going to carry the load for us this year. I think Quizera turns more from a goal scorer to, getting more assists than last season. So I think it's a really entertaining attack to watch. Of course, Matt's already in the chat saying Frank will score off corners. Matt's just praying that Frank is the player of the match, because Matt's handing out the player of the match paddle at the first match. So I hope he does at the first match, Matt. I really hope so for you. And just a reminder, as we kind of get going on all of our takes for the season, tune in tomorrow night on Twitter at 9:00 p.m. for the Call Hog Corner, where Kevin and Matt Hands will take you through their preseason predictions as well. So just more Tide Talk content coming out there for you. So none of us put a – Kevin's talking about injury juju on JJ. It's not going to happen. He's just going to battle through it. He's going to have a great year, and I think he's going to lead the team in goals. We'll kind of shift gears a bit, but we'll start with, the most important level. Zach, who do you think is going to be RIFC's MVP or most valuable player this year? Last year, Clay got it from the Defiance. So who do you think is going to be the MVP, most important player this year? You tell me. Who's going to be their best player this season? You want me to come back to you? All right, we'll kick it to Timmy first. Think about it, though, okay? We'll come back. We're going to go Timmy, then we're going to come back to you. Timmy, who do you have as RIFC's MVP this season?
I'm gonna keep it simple for myself. I'm just gonna go with Noah Fuson again, or not again. He didn't win it last season. I think it'll be Noah. He was the golden playmaker last year. What did he have? 18 goal contributions. 10 assists, 8 goals. I think, again, like we've said it throughout this entire pod so far, like the team really wasn't firing at this clip until the second half of the season. If we can get 3 quarters to a full season of them playing the way they played in the second half, I think it'll be Noah. And I think Maxi could be a good shout, as also just like really high goals, really high assists, and I think that's just an appealing choice for a most valuable player.
I like the Maxi shout from a goal contribution, perception, like you said. Zach, do you have someone yet?
Yeah.
Who is it?
Noah.
Noah? Why?
I think he's going to be good this season.
Think he's gonna be good. Score a lot of goals, assists. Okay, all right, good shout. So you have JJ or Maxi as your top goal scorer and Noah as your MVP. All right, that's good stuff. Good pairings. Andrew, what do you got?
I'm between Noah and Maxi, and I think I'm going to go Maxi. And Timmy, I think Noah was their MVP last year by the team.
He was the club's.
He was the club's MVP, and then obviously from a Defiance perspective, we went with Clay. Both very deserving. So I think it's going to be Maxi, just because I think that the position that he plays in is just going to be so central to everything. I think there's a very good chance that he might lead the team in touches. He's going to be central to every attacking movement that they have. And I just think that he's going to be the glue that holds a lot of that offensive structure together and really enable Noah and JJ to do the work that they do. So I'm going to go with JJ, but I could easily see it being, with Maxi. I could easily see Noah get that as well, especially if he continues the progression that we saw throughout the year last year. I think he's destined for big things, and I do think that Noah can very reasonably be even better this year than he was last year, and that's already setting a pretty high bar.
And Brett Johnson was super high on Noah when he was on. So if you haven't listened to that Brett interview he had on Tide Talk, make sure you go back and click that. Ryan says, good to have the Noah Hive representation on the show in my absence. Really good video from the club today with Noah and Clay going out to some season ticket holders and kind of presenting them with some stuff and hanging out with them. While we do have the Noah Hive on here, I'm here to say not so fast in full League Corso style. RIFC's MVP of the season. The Defiance got it right last year. It's going to be the same again. Clay Holstead, the absolute Swiss pocket knife of a player that we have, is going to play central midfield. He's going to play right wing back. He might play left wing back. He might play some number 10. He's going to be all over the pitch, and he's going to, I think, really step up his assist numbers this season with just absolute ballers to ping the ball to everywhere, all over the pitch. I see him getting in some really good areas, and he picks out a good pass. He only scores bangers too. Top shelf Clay is going to bend some in, and he's going to absolutely kill it. So I'm going with Clay as my MVP for this season. I think he just has an outstanding year with all of this talent around him.
I mean, I love Clay, and I hope he has that kind of year. And MVP is always an interesting one in other sports too. When you hear about who the MVP is, there's always a debate of, is it the best player or the team or the player that's most valuable to that team's performance. And given the way this team is structured from a roster depth perspective, I could see Clay being the most valuable person on that team because he is, like you said, that Swiss Army knife, and he's going to be able to fill all of those different open spots that happen because of injury or whatever else. He's going to do a really good job at it. So I can easily see him being the actual most valuable player on the team this year.
All right. The next one's, I don't think as clear cut as most people would think, but when we talk about most improved player on this team, we look at a pretty solidified 11 and kind of who could step in. So Timmy, we'll start with you on this one. Who do you see as being the most improved player for RIFC this year?
Yeah, so this is the question I mentioned. I was going to show my respect to Joe Brito in the future. I'm going to go with Joe Brito here because if it's most improved on their performance from last season by the end of this season, I think by the end of last season, Joe Brito was one of our best pieces off the bench. Like, he was hugely important, especially when we were protecting leads late in a lot of games. He was a spark of energy off the bench. He was really good at holding on to the ball, and he chipped in with some important goal contributions as well. So I think if we get a full season of what we got in the second half from Joe Brito, he will be my pick for most improved player. And that is partially an indictment on what I was sort of mentioning before, which is like in the first half of the season, I wasn't a huge fan of Brito's game. When he eventually moved to the bench, I kind of dreaded him coming on. He became one of my favorite players. So again, I think, he will probably see slightly less minutes this upcoming season because the midfield just got even more crowded with all the talent that we have. He might be the second or third midfield substitution, which is crazy to think about. But he's looked involved in the preseason, the few preseason clips that we've seen so far. So I'm really excited to see his season this year.
Good shout. Zach, who do you think is going to be your most improved player this season?
Zach.
Zach Haribo. Good shout. Why do you think he's going to be the most improved?
I think he's going to score more goals.
More goals this season. He did have that stretch where he got hot. So if he can keep that goal contribution, pace up, it would be a really good shot. That's an interesting one. That's a good one. Good job, buddy. Andrew, what do you got for your most improved?
I was torn on this one because there's two ways you can take it. There's the most improved from last year, and there's the most improved over the course of this season. I think if we're looking at over the course of the season, my answer would have been Hugo Bacharach. I think he's going to end up having a really strong season where you see a progression throughout the whole year. This injury now, knowing that he's going to be out for a bit of time, kind of dampers that a bit because not only is he going to miss that beginning part of the season when the team is gelling together, it's unclear what that injury is or what he's going to look like when he comes back. So that would have been my answer pre-injury news. And if you're comparing to last year, I go back to Chico. Like, I just think he's going to play with so much.
That's a good shout too.
So much freer than he did last year. The weight was on his shoulders. He was the guy. JJ was out for so long. The expectations were so high. The team wasn't really gelling. So there was a lot of pressure for him to put him away. There's no pressure now. This team is loaded offensively. I think he's going to play a lot freer, and we're going to see a better version of him than we saw last year.
I like that. That's pretty well said. Giving Chico the nod there. I'm going to go with Danny Rivera. I think that we have a pretty trusted 11 for Kano and from his perspective. And I think Rivera is not going to be the type of player that walks right into the starting 11. But I do think once he gets his chance, it's going to be almost like Noah last year, where he went through his super sub stage and then he slides into the team and really solidifies his place. I could see Rivera doing this. He's got a lot of USL Championship experience with Sac Republic. I think he steps in and he just does an absolute bang up job. I think he locks down that starting right wing back spot for the season. I think when we saw him come in, we kind of looked at it as a really good depth signing for Turnbull and Turnbull leaving, and then we saw Turnbull depart, and we were all kind of worried that, you know, he was brought in as a depth piece, but we lost one of our, you know, most dependable players from last season. But I think Rivera comes in and does a really nice job and really solidifies the right wing back spot. Like I said, I don't think he starts from the get, but I think he does come in and kind of solidifies and makes that his spot and almost becomes undroppable, like we've seen some players with Kano and in Kano's system last season. But I get that from your perspective, Andrew, of it, you know, I look at it as a player over the course of this season.
Yeah. I hope you're right, because I think if you were to look at the starting 11, the biggest question mark is that right wing back spot. Like, there's no guaranteed starter there. There's no guy that jumps off the page that said that's the person that's going to be starting there. I do think it's going to end up being a bit of a rotation. And if he ends up solidifying himself as the starter down the stretch, I think it's a really good sign for this team, because then it does free up Clay and others to be able to work in those different positions. Frank as well. We're not trying to go to the well and just trying to fill that position because we don't trust him there. So if he does great there, then that's a big win for around this year.
And it's an experienced player coming in to do so. So I think it could be a really good, you know, opportunity for him. Zach interrupted me during while you were talking to Andrew. He has another shout for most improved. Go ahead, buddy.
Isaac.
And why do you think Isaac will be, you know, most improved?
Because he's getting more healthier.
Right. So Isaac's coming off that season-ending injury. He looks to be in great shape. You know, he was a super sub of late in many games. So if Isaac can come in and, you know, kind of help change things, that midfield dynamic that, you know, Timmy and Andrew both mentioned, it's so stacked. And you bring in Isaac, who had some really good experiences last season, has some you know, experience now, so he could be a real difference maker if he gets healthy and is able to get himself back on the pitch. Next up, we got in kind of one of our final thoughts as far as players go. Who do you think will be more important than we initially expected, Timmy?
I know that Ryan is just screaming Taimu Okiyoshi at his screen right now while he's watching at the airport or whatever. I'm going to leave that one for Ryan when he wants to make it. But I think that is a good show. And then I'm going to go with Eldar Sanchez. I hope I'm saying the first name correctly, but I think he has a really good opportunity. He's 22 years old, but I believe he mostly started for Sacramento Republic last season. They mentioned him during the broadcast last night too and spoke highly of him, which I thought was nice. But we brought him in as we think left wing back kind of deputy for Quizera, but we know with Quizera's international duty with the Rwandan national team that means there will be plenty of opportunities for Eldar to get involved. And again, he's 22 years old, looks like a really promising player. Again, I know I shouldn't read too much into the preseason clips.
Ryan likes what you're saying though, so it's good.
That's after he came at me, all I want is for Ryan to agree with me. So I feel validated now. But yeah, he's looked, Sanchez has also looked like decently involved in the preseason clips that have been posted. I think he's got a couple of assists, and I don't put a ton of stock in preseason score lines or stats, but I do think like if he's
the club doesn't either because they don't share him. No, I wouldn't have liked to go to that game at Tidewater against Portland at all. That's completely fine. I wouldn't have. Are you kidding me? I would have been there tailgating on top of the Apex Pyramid this morning.
Of course, I would have been in a kayak with binoculars if I knew that game was going on. That's obscene. But
we could have set up on Celebration Pier, no problem.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's kind of my guess is that like we're going to see some Sanchez cameos when Quizera is maybe making international appearances, but then I think he's going to like push for that starting spot. Or my like super hot take is if they're going to find a way to have both of them on the pitch and not both playing left wing back. Obviously, I don't know if there's another position one of the two of them could slot in, but that's just another thought.
Jason in the chat agrees with your kind of preemptive point to that all. I have a feeling Taimu will be a key part for us this year. He looks really sharp. He looks really good and be quite the player. But Zach, we'll kick it to you next. Who do you think is going to be more important than we initially thought? Maxi, why? You had Maxi as your 1 or 2 to lead the team in scoring. So why do you think he's going to be even more important
than that?
You got to talk to the people now. You got to face the people and tell them what you think. Why is he going to be that good?
Because he's going to have a lot of assists.
Assists? Yeah. I could see Maxi, I think that's a good shout because I could actually see Maxi giving, Noah's run for the playmaker, award, or the Golden Playmaker award. I could see him very much challenging for that in the USL Championship season. So I'll give you a fist bump on that one. That was a pretty good one. Quadros, who do you got for more important than we may have thought?
Yeah, I'm gonna say F. Ryan, and it's Taimu Okiyoshi. That is the player. I think the position that he's coming into is stacked, so it was easy to overlook that and say, well, maybe he'll get a lot of time. But being that kind of deep lying midfielder, a really versatile guy, one that can distribute really well. A lot of the subs that we saw kind of make early in games last year were really those 6 and 8 spots in the midfield because they do a lot of running. They get very involved and they want to keep those guys fresh. And I can see with all the offensive firepower we have, Taimu maybe getting more time subbing in kind of those deeper line midfield spots and becoming a bigger piece of this puzzle than we necessarily anticipated. Obviously, he's got a good pedigree from a college perspective, All-American for a couple of years. I think he's just going to be a really solid fit for what we want. And then if there's an injury or two, which, you hope not, but there's always something there that could really open the door for him to really being a significant part of this. My honorable mention, I think, has been taken here by some of the comments here. I could see Amos. I mean, he was just so, he barely played last year. We only got to see him at the very end of the year. We had a lot of high hopes for him, but we don't really know what to expect from him yet because we haven't seen him over an extended period of time. I could easily see him carving himself a pretty significant role this year. But if I were to pick between the two of who I think is going to have a bigger impact this year, I'm leaning toward Okiyoshi.
Yeah, good stuff. William, our good friend from Sacramento, agrees with you, Timmy. Aldair could be very well with RI after his Sacramento stints. So good to see there. I'm going to go with one that, often kind of gets maligned kind of by the way he plays on the back line. I'm going to go with Karifa Yao. Grant Stoneman's going to be 30 by the end of the season. Frank's young, Karifa's young. We kind of look at the center back, play out how it plays out. But I think Karifa Yao could have a very big year for us, and not in the the goal contribution metrics, but kind of in helping to keep clean sheets and hopefully staying away from cards and getting bounced off. But I think Yao could have a very, very big year and put in some really big tackle numbers, in kind of those defensive metrics that help you win championships, if you will. I know he's a player that doesn't get often talked about or does get talked about a lot for, his mistakes. But I was a big proponent of last season that a lot of the goals that came on him or looked to be scored on him were actually goals that he was covering for Frank, and Frank kind of being out of position. I'm sorry, Matt Hands, but I think Karifa Yao is kind of that cleanup guy on the back line, and I think his importance kind of goes a little bit, underappreciated at times.
There was briefly a discussion on the Defiance Discord of who on the roster right now can you feel very confident that are guaranteed they're going to start? And that list isn't huge because of all the options that we have across the different positions. I think Koke is one. Maxi is probably one. Karifa Yao, I think, is the other. I think that he is locked in to that central center back spot, and he just had such a good year last year. Led the team in minutes. He is just our rock back there, and I agree. I think it's a good shout.
Thank you, appreciate that. So before we kind of wind this one down and wrap up, we'll look at March as a whole. We have 3 road matches in March, so we'll look at the March point total. So Zach, we'll start with you. RIFC plays 3 games in March. They're at Charleston, they're at Phoenix, and they're at Loudoun. What do you think they do? What do you think they do versus Charleston?
I think it's going to be a really good game.
Do you think they win? Do you think they lose? Or do you think they tie?
I think it's probably going to be a really close game, but I think they might lose by 1.
All right, she's got a loss in game 1. They go to Phoenix next. Do you think they win, lose, or tie versus Phoenix?
I think they're going to tie.
A tie at Phoenix, and then the last match in March is at Loudoun. How do you think they do in that one? Win, lose, or tie?
Last year they tied 0-0, both 2 games, so I'm going to go 0-0.
All right, so Zach's got 2 points in the first 3 games for RFC. Pretty conservative approach there. Like Ryan says, who is the new co-host? Zach, that's pretty well said, picking up stats from last season. I didn't even hit you with that, so that's good stuff, man. He reads the ESPN app like Encyclopedia Britannica. And I do want to thank Kevin for saying the correct answer is indeed Yao for most important. But that would be a bit of a nightmare start, according to Ryan, only getting 2 points in the first 3 games. Sclafani, let's kick it to you and see what you got.
Okay, for next weekend, Charleston, I guess, in the score predictions game, I think I went 2-1 Rhode Island, so I will stick with that. I don't feel great about it. I'm also going to the game, and I feel like I'm very cursed as far as attending games, especially on the road. So I feel horrible about it, but I'm going 2-1. So give me 3 points there. I think Phoenix doesn't impress me, and I don't know that they did anything too impressive.
And we know that one's kind of personal for Brett. He did mention that one as being a one he wanted to see a win.
Straight up disowned Phoenix in the interview the other week. He was like, I'm done with Phoenix. They lost last night to Tulsa. I'm going to give us a win in Phoenix as well. And then I'll go draw with Loudoun because I think I expected Loudoun to stink. Obviously, they beat Birmingham last night 3-1, which shocked me. So I'll give us a draw with Loudoun. So 7 out of 9 points in March.
All right, Andrew, what do you got?
That's interesting. Beat Charleston at Charleston, but not beat Loudoun. That's interesting.
Stay tuned.
Honestly, it's tough. We're coming off the back of 4 straight away games to end the year last year, and obviously the pressure builds in each one of those, and you can see the toll that it took on them when they got to the final. There's only the first 3 games we're talking about here, but knowing that you're starting off the season with so many road games has to be a bit daunting. And then, it's going to take them a little bit of time to gel. At least I would think so. So I look at Charleston, and they're going to be down a man. He didn't start yesterday, Arturo Rodriguez, when he got the red card. He actually played for like 7 minutes. He came in 7 minutes later. He got the red card. But he did start against Rhode Island in the Eastern Conference Final last year. So I don't know if he's going to be a starter for them or not, but that might end up being a big absence for Charleston. I think Rhode Island will be up for the game, as will Charleston. So I'm looking at a tie in Charleston next week and kind of continuing the trend of the regular season draws that they had last year. For Phoenix, that's a tough spot. I mean, it's a 10 p.m. game Eastern time. Obviously, they'll be over in the West Coast, but I think that's always a bit of a difficult draw there. So I think it's going to be another tie as the team is really starting to try to find its form and dealing with all this different travel. Obviously, they just changed where they're training. Like there's just a lot of change and adaptation the team has to go through. So looking at 2 ties to start. And then Loudoun, I don't care that they beat Birmingham last year. Birmingham, the dark horses for the league this year with the offseason they had. So a bit of a surprising result, but I'm not worried about them yet. They just play boring soccer, and I think this team should be able to take care of them, even on the road, even though it's their 3rd straight away match there. So I'll go 5 points, draw, win.
So Birmingham get a lot of off-season credit for bringing in Turnbull, signing Turnbull, didn't play him, and then go out and get smoked versus Loudoun, who on paper, I believe that's Ryan's words, or maybe even yours, Andrew, from our Discord, is a pretty bad team. They're a pretty poor team. So to go out there and kind of get smoked on that is for me, it's just like I didn't really see the hype with them. I know people were kind of picking them very highly. For me, I think Birmingham is still a ways away as to climbing the Eastern Conference ladder. But to go out there and have that Loudoun result, I think was an absolute stinker. Big shout out to TQ in the house. What's up, Tommy? I'm gonna go with my prediction now. We'll start with at Charleston. I think we go there and beat them. I think we beat them 2-1, very similar to Louisville. Charleston, if you watch that game, Charleston had the lion's share of possession. Who does that scream out to as to what style they want to play? Go ahead, boys. Answer me. Go ahead.
Rhode Island FC.
That is what Kano wants. Kano wants Charleston to have the ball, viva Jose Mourinho, and mess around with it and mess up, and we hit on the counter. And we're going to play them just like Louisville did, and that's what's going to happen. We're going to escape Charleston with a 2-1 lead. It's going to be more of a comfortable 2-1 than kind of one of those white-knuckle 2-1s. Maybe Charleston chips one in late. I've got another win in Phoenix. Like I said, the Brett Darby. Brett put a big emphasis on that. I don't think Phoenix is that good this year. I think they're going to fall a bit off the pace. I think we go in and kind of candidly take care of Phoenix. And then I think the Loudoun match versus Birmingham was very much an indictment of Birmingham not being ready, but Loudoun being very stingy. And before we played Loudoun last season, they were a very stingy team. They did not concede a lot of goals, but they did not score a lot of goals. I see that as being our first draw of the season, not at all in the draw king fashion of last season. But I see us getting 7 points from these first 3 games and sitting pretty, as far as the Eastern Conference goes and being really well. So I think it's going to be a really good start to the season with those 3 matches, and I think we can fully kind of take advantage of that. Anyone got any pushback for anyone else on those predictions?
Hey, Dad.
Mhm.
I actually,
Zach's got something. Go ahead.
in the Phoenix game, what did I say again?
I think you had that one as a win.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think you had it as a win.
I think you had.
That's what happens when you drink on podcast.
Zach had 2 points total.
Oh, you had a draw.
You had
You had a
lost
draw.
draws and 2 draws.
I think I actually might win.
Oh, he's changing his Phoenix prediction to a win, so he's gonna go with 4 points. A win, a loss, and a draw in the first 3. That's pretty fair. That's pretty good. But now I think the biggest question is we'll look at RIFC seeding and where this RIFC team will finish the season. So the USL Championship put out the power rankings in the East. In the whole league, and had us in 3rd. Ahead of Charleston, it was Colorado Springs, Louisville, us, then Charleston. Was that correct?
I can't remember. There was some poll that Colorado Springs was listed first, which I can't figure out why, because they lost players.
Oh, that was. I think there was a USL Power Rankings that had Colorado Springs.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The USL Power Rankings had us 3rd. So Zach, we'll start with you. We're looking at just the Eastern Conference. Where do you see RIFC finishing the season? What place are the Tide going to finish in? Second place? Who's going to finish first? Louisville or Charleston? Louisville. Okay. So that pretty respectable second season finishing in 2nd place. Timmy, we'll kick it to you.
So I have us 3rd, and the only thing, my overreaction from last night is, like, before last night, I thought we were going to be 3rd, but could finish honestly 4th or 5th, depending on how other teams maybe performed. But my feeling after last night is actually everyone else outside of the top 3 stinks, and we're definitely going to finish 3rd, or could finish 1st or 2nd. But I'll take 3rd.
I agree. I think there's a massive gulf in talent with outside of RIFC, Louisville, and Charleston. It's kind of where those 3 are going to finish and how they're going to flip flop. Who's going to stay healthiest? Who maybe brings in a player that can kind of change the dynamic. Andrew, what do you got?
I got 3rd as well, and I've gone back and forth in this. Louisville just has so much going for them in terms of the quality and depth of their roster and just the way they run that organization. I think they have to be favorites to win the East, despite how well Rhode Island and Charleston have done. For Charleston, they lost Markanich, which was a big loss for them, and then they pick up Cal Jennings, and they had a pretty decent offseason considering they lost the MVP from last year. So I expect them to have a good year too. So my heart tells me that Rhode Island is good enough to be 1st or at worst 2nd. But my head's telling me I think that there's going to be periods in this season, particularly early on when they're on the road for a while, that they might still be looking to stabilize or just find their footing and figure things out. So I'm trying to temper that. So I tempered myself down to 3rd. I just don't see them slipping really below 4th. But this league is wild. I mean, we saw last night. We'll continue to see over the course of the year. really hard to figure out where these teams are going to land over the course of the season. I do have a confession that I'm worried that we have so much expectation because of what we saw this team grow into last year, and then getting Maxey. And like, how many times in sports have you seen a team that finished a year strong, and then you just expect them to be able to pick up where they left off and then continue to improve? I think they very well can do that. But last year they had no expectations for the most part, really. I mean, I think people wanted them or expected that they'd at least make the playoffs. They expected them to take care of the Derby games against Hartford and finish above them, but no one really expected them to go all the way to the final. And now those expectations are there, and it's not just expectations that we have, but the players themselves have to be able to feel. They must feel that and feel the weight of that. And we don't know how people react in those situations yet. So while I do think they're going to have a really strong year, I just seen this play out so many times in other leagues and other sports where you end up with a letdown because of what all the weight of the expectations were. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm just worried that it is going to happen. But for my guess here, I'm going with third, and I do think that they're going to be in the mix there with Charleston and Louisville.
Pretty good shout. I'm going to tell you you're both wrong, and I'm going to preface it with Ryan's comment in the chat. Would it surprise any of you if it's first?
No.
It would not surprise me, Ryan. I really think it's going to be first. And I know he just said it too. I think it could truly be first. And I was, up until maybe 2 minutes ago, I was coming in with second on my pick, but I'm going to go even more kind of, positive than I would have. Watching that game last night and kind of looking at the offseason that Charleston and Louisville both had, I really thought that Louisville lost more. But Charleston without Mark Hannick looked a lot different than they did with him. The struggle to kind of create chances and, have possession, but wasteful possession reminded me of a lot of another team that I know, looking at you, Timmy. But they really struggled to make possession meaningful, and I think that's going to haunt them throughout the season. I think Louisville is going to be, I originally thought Louisville was going to fall back a bit, Charleston was going to win the East by a mile, and RIFC was going to kind of finish second. But I think after watching that game last night that Louisville is going to kind of be who they are. I think they're going to struggle to score at times against good defensive setups. And I think RFC has proven what they can do against Louisville. So I think that'll obviously be one of them. But I do think Charleston is going to struggle to score a lot more than we think this year. Obviously, they had that one goal. But I'm going with RFC to win the East, to win that Shield, and to make another final, and anything can happen from there, baby. So I'm going with my gut of RFC is actually going to go out there and win it, and hopefully we host the USL Championship final this year, because that would just absolutely be incredible in year one of Tidewater landing in the USL Championship.
That'd be unreal in that stadium to be able to host. That would just be unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. Hashtag winning.
A lot of it comes down, or not a lot of it, but I do think a big part of this comes down to how they can handle this road trip at the beginning of the year. Because if we come out of that in decent shape, and then all of a sudden we have basically a home game what feels like every single week for the rest of the year, they're really primed to be able to hit the summer running. So I'm really hoping for just a strong away trip here, and then really get into the beginning of May on all fire and all cylinders.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an awesome season. Obviously, it's going to be the summer of soccer here in Rhode Island, as we are going to be at Tidewater more than we're at our own homes on most weekends. So it's going to be pretty exciting and pretty good stuff, all along. Zach, you made your podcast debut tonight. How was it? Did you enjoy being on the show?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Why? Tell us. Did you have fun?
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell them. Say thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Tim. No,
great job, Zach.
Zach,
how are you with writing?
A little camera side. Had some pretty good takes tonight, though, and those were all uncoerced. Those were all his takes. So pretty good. Zach's also a really tough out in the Club Collector app. So again, if you're not on that Club Collector site, go into the code TideTalk25, all one word, all lowercase. Get your pack today. Zach, if you had to pick your starting three today, who are you starting on Club Collector? And this could be anyone, not just cards that you have right now. If your ideal three players, who are you starting?
Can I do the 5 thing?
You could do the 5, yeah.
I'm gonna do up to 5.
He's already gearing up for the 5-player league. Craig, you've created a monster. So who we got?
Noah, JJ, Maxie, Clay, and Dequa.
That'd be a pretty good 5. Pretty formidable 5 there. So good take. Nose
Goal
ball.
and assist in multiple times.
Definitely double stacking those points there.
Yeah.
We got you and Zach knows ball. So that is good stuff. And as Ryan says, he is the club collector savant in there. Timmy, we'll kick it to you. Any final thoughts you have before we put an end to this one?
No, I don't think so. Just really, really anxious for the season to get started. Kind of bummed that I'll miss you guys next weekend. I'm excited to go to the game, but I'm really looking forward to the first game of the season that we can all watch together, which I guess probably won't be Phoenix either. It's probably going to be Loudon. So I've got a little bit to wait, but
for sure.
Yeah,
You'll
really
have to send us some content from the road though.
Definitely will. It's going to be food.
Yeah,
there you go.
that's the kind of content.
Don't think, like Timmy mentioned, don't think we're doing any live stream at Providence Brewing. I think a lot of us kind of plan on going to the guilds for the watch party. If that changes, we'll let you know. We'll kind of see what has our Ryan says come see us at Providence Brewing. So maybe we are doing the live show. We haven't fully kicked that one around. But make sure you follow Tide Talk RI on all of our socials to get that one figured out. Andrew, final thoughts.
Yeah, I'm just pumped to have it back. It was great to watch the rest of the league get into gear last night, and it's been a long off season. So actually having tangible things to watch and discuss, because we've been so deprived of that over the past 3 or 4 months. It's like pulling teeth to get any information from this team. So being able to have things that we can really discuss and see the team on the field again is going to be exciting. And then, all systems go for that May 3rd game. So really excited for that. But just pumped to have this team back in action next week.
Awesome. I guess one last question I'll hit the two of you with. Timmy, would you rather see that cup game come before the home opener? Or would you rather see the league opener first?
Oh, the Open Cup?
Yeah.
I think I don't want to miscite anything. I think we were told. I think I heard that's not going.
Not going to be the case. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
If it were a possibility, I think that there should be like I would love there to have been like a dress rehearsal type event. I mean, I guess the soccer stadium.
Also worth noting on our tour, they did say they were going to do a ticketed event preemptive of the home opener, where you go in, actually scan your tickets, then kind of measure wait times and stuff like that. So
yeah, I think that is the tournament, the 5-on-5 tournament that they're doing. Right. I believe they were saying that they will give like free tickets to everyone who wants to go to that. So you will actually like scan a ticket and you can go and watch, which sounds great because I want to get back in the stadium as soon as I possibly can.
Absolutely. Spend as much time there as possible. All right, guys, that'll wrap things up for this one. Remember, Tide Talk is more than just a podcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook for daily social media content. Click that link in this episode description to follow all of our accounts. I've been your host, Matt, for Timmy, Andrew, and Zach making his debut. Thanks again for joining. We'll see you next time. And as always, up the tide.
Up the tide.
Up the tide.